I am sure you've never heard an adhan like this one. This adhan makes me feel so happy every time I listen to it. I mean, having a blues rendition of the adhan it speaks to my heart. This very specific adhan, I don't know if it's the same brother, is actually the opening scene of the book Medina by the Bay, Scenes of Muslim Study and Survival, written by Mariam Kashani and published by Duke University Press in 2023. So it's a 12-year-long anthropology study, which is basically a long-term insider ethnography, which if you've watched this channel, you probably know that this is what I love and I do. It starts with Bismillah. Again, you find the verses of the Quran. And it is a study which is out of an extremely diverse sample, meaning that Muslims who are like practicing, non-practicing, Shia, Sunni, from different ethnicities, different socio-economic backgrounds, and different gender orientations and more. Just like for any long-term insider ethnography, the author has been playing different roles in the various communities in the San Francisco Bay Area. She mentions she's been a student at Zaytuna, just a random woman, an audiovisual technician, a community member, and of course a researcher, which opened many doors. But as we know, being an insider doesn't always open doors, because she had some doors closed in front of her. What's the goal of the book? So she writes that Medina by the Bay is a conceptual frame, a social geography and infrastructure of feeling. So she considers the Bay Area as an ecosystem which is made where everything is interrelated, whether it is nature, the material things, the humans, and the emotions, and the spiritual, of course. So her goal is to demonstrate how this ecosystem, how the geography, the cultural, social, and economic forces, and also geopolitical forces impact Muslims' beliefs, practices, societies, and how some traits in Muslims become either dominant or further marginalized. So if you've ever been in the Bay Area, you know for most outsiders, it feels like a magical place, because you've got so many things at the same time, and the vibe it's very hard for me to describe. People are usually very chilled. I'm sure it has changed with, the tech boom and so on, and the rise of prices, gentrification, but there's something special about the Bay Area, and I guess this is why she calls it like Medina by the Bay, because this is where people would go and do hijrah. If you are in search of a safe place, for many people, this is the Bay Area. But of course, it's also been a place for the dissemination of knowledge because of Zaytuna and other organizations. It's been a place for creativity. There is lots of Muslim arts collective over there. But she focuses on two keywords: knowledge, which is, I think, obvious. We're talking about not only Zaytuna College, but also all the different lineage of knowledge that came into the Bay Area, and survival, which I find interesting. So she mentions, for Muslims, material survival is subservient to spiritual survival. We can have housing, clothing, food, health, education, and employment, but if our hearts have hardened towards Allah and one another, we are already dead. Survival is thus not only a matter of preserving one's own safety and subsistence, it is also a matter of accountability in which one bears, quote, responsibility for the violence of the nation of which you are subject, end quote. So she is very critical of the different power dynamics that play for or against Muslims in the area, but she is also critical of certain different communities that are present in the area. And one key actor is, of course, Zaytuna College. Do Zaytuna College and Muslim communities carry forward the anti-imperialist, anti-racist, internationalist, and faith-centered social justice legacy of El-Shabazz, Malcolm X, or do they offer pathways to cultural citizenship that buttress a settler colonial United States, establishing themselves as authoritative voices and representatives amid a quote-unquote crisis of authority? What stems from this book is it is really and truly a work of love. You can feel it, you can read it between the lines. She is really passionate about her fieldwork. And when you love a community, you have to be critical of it as well, because you want to see people improve, you want to see things becoming better. So I think it is fair to examine certain things under this critical lens and hold people who hold power to account. The plan of the book is pretty straightforward. The first chapter lays out key scenes that present, I would say, the evolution of Islamic practices in Muslims from the 1950s to present day. So you learn a lot about the history, who are the first Muslims coming to the Bay Area, what are the first institutions, the grassroots group, and you get to learn about the genesis of Zaytuna. Chapter 2 is, I would say, roughly about the different currents of thoughts you can find in the Bay Area. She talks about lineage of knowledge, lineage of liberation, genealogies, and how all of these reorder, reshape along the lines of race, class, gender, and a school of thought, let's say, the relations and responsibilities of all different groups and individuals. Chapter 3 is about government, surveillance and monitoring policies, but at the same time there's a hopeful side about Muslim solidarity. Chapter 4 is more about ethical considerations of her work and her approach, and Chapter 5, epistemologies of the oppressor and the oppressed, is about a very, very interesting anecdote she observed at Zaytuna College, which revolves about the book The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. More on that in a minute. So the first thing that strikes with this book is that it is written like a film script, and because the author is not only an academic, but also a filmmaker. So she has a very specific way of narrating her observations, which she calls an ethno-cinematic scenes. Scene 1, place, time. The first actor says XYZ, second actor says XYZ. There's an object on this location, so it's very, very descriptive. Two reasons for that. She says our knowledges of the world, how we sense, think, and make meaning are mediated by images. So the ethno-cinematic approach allows her and the reader to traverse, collapse, and expand space and time. And she says, I refuse to tell the history of Islam in the Bay Area in a linear timeline and from a single point of view, which I think are great justifications. However, my first reaction when I read it is, I'm not, really sure, because, a film script is very, very different from the final audiovisual result. This basically is a skeleton. I really, really wish she made a documentary, but at the same time, I understand, because she wants to make herself as absent as possible from the narration. There's always interference because the writer can always select, what to talk about, what to focus on. There's a lot of elements that are under the control of the writer. But, I get it. But it's, if you haven't read any film scripts before or any theater plays, which are written very similarly, it can be a bit unsettling, but you get used to it. And as an academic, I always welcome innovation because, we need to divert power from the ivory tower. It's not because we've been doing the same thing for centuries that academic has to, be only like books which are not going to be read by anyone but the researcher or the students. It has to be practical, it has to be relatable, and it has to be creative in its approaches. It's experimental. Experimentation is at the heart of academia. So this is why I think this is a brilliant initiative. One anecdote that really caught my attention was that one anecdote after a class of Zaid Shakir, who teaches Islamic history, and he tells his students to read the book The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon, which I think is brilliant because it is impossible to understand the history as like the sociology, the politics of Muslim populations in North Africa, West Africa, and even like the Middle East and South Asia without reading Frantz Fanon. It is a key masterpiece when it comes to understanding the colonial dynamics of history. We see the same classroom mostly empty. A few students linger in the classroom writing or reading. Other students leave their books on their desks as they shuffle out of the classroom. A Latina woman sits in the back of the classroom with the anthropologist, so the author, who is writing in her notebook. Another professor, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, walks in and looks at the books piled on the desks. He notices The Wretched of the Earth on a student's desk and starts to get upset. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, pointing to the book, asks no one in particular. "What is this book doing here? Why is it here? I don't want people seeing this here." He continues to grumble about and deprecate the text. "Student, we are reading it in Islamic history." Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, "Who is teaching it?" Student, quietly, "Imam Zaid." Yusuf becomes quiet but continues to look troubled. Fade to black. So she writes further, analyzing the situation. Yusuf's visceral reaction involved both a prior value judgment on Fanon's theoretical contributions and an expression of concern regarding the possible misperception of the college. Well, if you're a founder, you're worried about brand image. Despite his disagreements with it, Shakir saw Fanon's text as foundational for understanding a critical part of the Islamic history, demonstrating that one cannot imagine a Muslim future without contending with its colonial histories, as well as with its histories of anti-colonial resistance, liberation, and third world politics. Yeah, because one, I would say not flaw, but one characteristic of Fanon's work is that these are work devoid of religion. But they are right. If you want to understand history, if you want to understand the current debates around Islamophobia, the current debates about colonialism, genocide, and so on, you have to read decolonial literature. It's impossible to understand the present day without reading about history. So if you want to immerse yourself in the wonderful world of Muslims in the San Francisco Bay Area, especially the East Bay, Oakland, and elsewhere, this is more than a recommended read. I think it's like a gem of a work because, it's long-term. She's probably the only person who have done such thorough work. It's very creative and you learn a lot. So thank you for watching. And again, take care of yourselves and each other.